All right, everybody. My honored guest today is Dr. Angie. Dr. Angie is a diplomat of the American Board of Internal Medicine and a diplomat of the American Board of Gastroenterology, two of my favorite topics when discussing digestive issues of females and especially ones with weight issues, etc. She got her training from the University of Southern California and specializes in treating diseases of the digestive tract, which is a really hot topic these days with all the diets out there. She's combined her expertise on the digestive system and her passion for physical fitness and plant-based nutrition, boom, and developed a comprehensive approach to helping patients recover from illness and live a healthier life. Additionally, she's part of a movement called Plantrition Project. I hope I said that right, and you can tell us more about that. She's also competed in a fitness competition, which I hope she'll share a little bit about, and we'll share mutual experiences about that. Dr. Angie is featured in 3 documentaries as a leader in the field of plant-based fitness for health and weight loss and wellness. She's currently working on a book, Trifecta of Rejuvenation and Health, and was recently published on the cover of Vegan Health and Fitness magazine, where she shared a health-related article on making nutrition and fitness fun. Something I talk about as well. Put the F-U-N in functional. Dr. Angie has said she wants to leave a legacy of a doctor who prevented disease in her patients using the mastery of combining integrative medicine, Western and Eastern medicine, which resonates with me, as you all know, and rather than simply just pharmaceuticals. Dr. Angie, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
I've always wanted to get more and more qualified female experts. I know they're out there, but they don't tend to have the voice and the popularity out there. They don't get the exposure they deserve, and a lot of the ladies out there are hungry to hear from female qualified experts. So I'm even more thrilled that you could be here, because I need more and more female voices of authority to lend experience to what people need to hear, which often isn't what they want to hear. Of course, the quote in the plant-based world, they want to hear good news about their bad habits, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But now, to begin, you had your own health issues and weight issues, is that correct?
I did, Scott. Growing up, I ate a terrible diet. I had a diet full of saturated fat, tons of dairy and meat. About 15 years ago, I became a vegetarian, but I ended up compensating for what I thought was lack of protein in my diet at the time by eating more dairy. Of course, that really was the reason that all my health problems escalated at that point on. So I ended up basically consuming all kinds of cheese and milk products and anything that came from a cow, basically dairy cows, because I wasn't eating meat. So then I developed severe eczema, and my eczema was so bad that I could barely sleep at night because I was itching almost every single night, all night. I was scratching my skin so badly I had scars from it.
Wow.
I started gaining a lot of weight, and we can go into more detail, but now we know how the metabolic effects of dairy and how deleterious that is for your health, and how it could lead to diabetes, insulin resistance, obesity, and all kinds of problems. So,
sorry to interrupt, but isn't it ironic? It just popped into my head that way back in the 50s that the prescription for ulcers was milk.
I know, and even to this day, Scott, when I get patients with heartburn, they come to me and say, I had a glass of warm milk for my reflux, and I got even worse. My heartburn got worse. I don't understand what's going on. You're literally basically putting poison in your stomach, and for whatever reason, the milk and dairy industry has labeled milk and milk products as health food, but that's propaganda. Obviously, that's not real medicine. It's not evidence-based medicine, and unfortunately, they hire these actors and athletes to vouch for that. But what people don't understand is that athletes didn't get there because they were drinking milk. In fact, that probably worked against them. They got there because of their training and nutrition overall, and probably partly genetics. But unfortunately, the meat and the dairy industry has so much money that they can pump into advertising. And so when you see those ads with the milk mustache,
I was just going to mention that. Yep. Like, and the catchphrase "got milk," like brilliant, right? Like it's,
right,
I mean,
right. People have to understand they have billions of dollars and so they can, in your mind, manipulate you and brainwash you into thinking milk is health food. It's not. It's simply horrible.
and a lot of these people achieve in spite of what they're doing, not because of what they're doing. That's your point?
Exactly. Absolutely. And so, yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was consuming a lot of milk. I had stopped eating meat, but at that point I didn't know as much about nutrition as I do now, and so I thought I was going to be protein deficient, not eating meat. So I started compensating with it by eating tons of dairy. So my health problems got even worse as my eczema got worse. I gained weight. I had elevated levels of cholesterol at age 35. And so it was a bad deal. And one day, about 5 years ago, when I basically decided that I was going to do something for my health, and I realized that my eating habits were catching up with me quickly, and they actually had caught up with me, but I was living in misery, and I didn't even know how to begin to get myself healthy. Just like everyone else, I was on the keto diet and the Atkins diet, all these garbage diets out there that were not for health. It was just specifically for weight loss. So I had sporadically jumped on the bandwagon and tried these fad diets with everyone else to lose weight. And of course the weight would come back and I was feeling miserable and I was very unhealthy. And 5 years ago, suddenly I decided that's it. I was going to change my lifestyle and pursue something that's actually healthy for me. And that's when I got back my life and my health.
And specifically for everybody, tell them what that means in terms of your diet.
Yeah, so I was at a conference. I really I'm sure you're probably the same, but I love these motivational seminars and things like that. I was attending one, and the speaker was talking about nutrition, and he was saying something about, well, if you wanted to lose weight, why would you be eating dairy? That's just going to do the exact opposite. So at that moment, something clicked in my mind. I realized I really have to learn more about nutrition. So I was talking to somebody, one of my cousins, and she said, you should watch Forks Over Knives. I went home, and that night I watched Forks Over Knives, which is a documentary on Netflix.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was an incredible documentary, and it forever changed my life. After watching that documentary, Scott, I decided I was going to start eating a whole food plant-based diet. So I had already stopped eating meat, and all I had to do is drop dairy out of my life and oils and sugars, right? Processed refined sugars, and eat tons of healthy whole food. And at that point on, I was like, I need a motivation in my life to do this, and I wanted to find a compelling vision to get me going, and I decided to sign up for a fitness competition as well.
Okay, well, we can definitely get into that. Yeah, Forks Over Knives. I've had Dr. T. Colin Campbell on my podcast as well, so that was a real special treat for me. Talk research with the person who actually changed the whole trajectory of nutrition research. I consider him sort of the father of modern nutritional, academic reality. So.
Absolutely.
Versus what's out there. It's interesting, you mentioned a few things that resonate with me, like what you call bullcrap diets and stuff, but the power of a repeated message to convince the consumer public that what they hear often enough becomes truth, right? So we live in this world politically and academically of alternative facts, where if people hear something enough and it's short enough to penetrate the brain, then it becomes a truth. So, like for instance, like the mustache and the got milk, and you got Rob Lowe doing Atkins commercials now, so you've got that sort of celebrity endorsement. And just before we went live, I was shaking my head at a Jenny Craig commercial. I mean, what kind of health food is delivered through the mail? So, it makes literally no sense at all when you step back and look at it. But there's a line I've been using a lot lately, which is belief is the end of reason. Belief is the enemy of reason. So that functions more, I think, in the diet and nutritional world than anywhere else. That once people are locked into a belief system, especially in the fitness world, because they have a vested interest in promoting animal products because of whey protein and because of supplements and because of all these other things. So we always try to keep in mind that our industry, the fitness and diet industry, is one that traffics in pseudoscience and profits heavily by using it because of supplements, diets, making people afraid, those kind of things. So you already touched on it, but you mentioned competing, and I don't know what your experience was doing that. I'm from that world, and I left that world in disgust for all kinds of reasons. But let's talk about a level of experience that goes on amongst competitors, and that is because of high protein diets, and that's constipation. I know you're an expert in gastroenterology, and I'm sure you have a lot of info to talk about there. And just before I let you riff on that, one of the reasons I left is I left that world because I trained competitors at a really high level, and just as figure was starting to come in rather than female bodybuilding, and what it was doing to the ladies is why I left. What it was doing to them psychologically, emotionally, but mostly physically and metabolically. I had competitors, which I don't understand. They would post these pictures online and glorify the competitive experience, and then days later, I've had more than one who had to actually have surgery because of impacted bowels because they were so constipated. And maybe you can comment a little bit on that.
Yes. So we all have to realize one thing. The bodybuilding industry, the way it's been traditionally, it is changing, I believe, slowly, but traditionally the diets for the bodybuilding industry was for a type of aesthetic that you see on stage for 2 seconds. It is not healthy. It has historically caused a lot of damage to people's health, in particular gut health. Which, of course, if you ruin gut health, what happens is you end up ruining everything else because health starts in the gut.
And they may not, sorry to interrupt, but the important point, and I'll try not to interject because I want to let you talk, but the problem there is it may not happen right away. Right. This may happen like 3 weeks after a contest, 3 months after a contest. Go ahead.
No, and you're absolutely right. I have many patients who are fitness competitors who are my patients because of their gut health, gut problems. And so when you eat a certain way to achieve a certain aesthetic, it doesn't mean that it is healthy. You can lose weight, you can build muscle and lose body fat, you can transform your body. There are many ways to do it. However, it doesn't mean that they're all healthy. And I'll talk about what I think is a healthy way of doing it. But I just want people to understand that important point. When you see these competitors look perfect on stage with these shredded bodies, it doesn't mean that they're healthy. Some of them are extremely depressed, which comes back to the gut microbiome. Some of them have depression and anxiety. Some of them have metabolic disorders. Some of them pass out and die shortly after they get off the stage. Some of them get impacted bowels because they haven't had any fiber in their diet for months and perhaps years. Some of them get heart problems. Some of them get abscesses because of medicines that they use, and we can talk about that. So it's definitely not a healthy world out there. Scott, I went into it not because I wanted to do it as a living. I went into it as I kind of quote unquote used it as a platform to get into the best shape of my life. I didn't go out there to win. It was, to me, I could care less if I go and I got last place. I just wanted to have a compelling vision in my mind that could help me, drive me to achieve a certain goal. And I did it the healthy way. I went whole food plant-based, and I set out my competition dates 9 months later. I was supposed to step on stage 30 pounds lighter and have more muscle. And so overnight I went whole food plant-based, and I my whole journey was on a whole food plant-based diet, which you could call high carb, which is the exact opposite of what the fitness competitors do.
Exactly.
Of course, it's not high sugar, it's high carb, which is high fiber. It's different than high sugar. But unfortunately, the fitness industry has demonized carbs. Carbs are bad for you, they say, and it makes absolutely no sense. And it has caused people to stop eating fruits and vegetables because they don't understand that those foods are very, very important for gut health. So the fitness competitors are now thinking, if I ate 250 grams of protein per day, then I'm gonna, that protein from an animal's muscle is gonna go directly into my biceps or glutes. That couldn't be farther from the truth. That's not what happens. But unfortunately, a lot of these coaches don't know what they're talking about, so they're teaching people incorrectly. As you know, I'm sure you know all this.
Well, yeah, I'm from that world. A lot of the repercussions that competitors have is also because of drug use, right? Competitors imagine what it must take for a female to faint and or almost collapse on stage when all she has to do is turn to the side 4 times. So, this isn't exactly like vigorous activity we're talking about. And a lot of that is from what we call orthostatic hypotension, just putting their arms over their head. Because of the diuretics, they tend to take the thiazide group of diuretics. Some go a little more hardcore with the loop diuretics, which we won't get into. And a lot of them just take plain aldosterone antagonists. But you can talk about that if you want, and we don't have to get into the whole drug side of the competitive world, but it's a reality. Usually that's something that's going on if a competitor can't even make it through quarter turns on stage. They combine that with cutting out carbs, so the level of dehydration is dangerous dehydration, like you said. Potassium controls the vagus nerve, which controls heartbeat, which gets all thrown out of whack with dehydration added to diuretics. So it's a real dangerous scenario. And then what bothers me about all that is the lack of authenticity and honesty about it, when these ladies just post endless pictures and glorify the experience that it was, and I know from firsthand knowledge because they were my clients. They won the show or they did well or whatever, and then online it's the best thing and it's so exciting, and offline they're writing me, like you said, post-contest depression, because now they've got what I call body image dependency disorder, because they only relate to their body as this, the polished physique that was on stage, which is not sustainable and unrealistic for anybody. And then the whole expectations that go along with that as well, that it's unrealistic, it's not sustainable, and then the whole metabolic rebound that happens and the weight rebound, and it's not a healthy thing, and it can be a really, really dark world. And now you've got coaches that are pouncing on that don't know. I don't want to rant too much about this, but in the competitive world, if someone's won a contest and a higher level contest, then they're quote unquote an expert. And so they're no nutritional background, no scientific background. Most of them don't even have, university educations. And, now they're promoting this. Well, our diets are metabolically healthy. Our diets are, and you look at them, they're the exact same diets that everyone else is doing, like you said, high protein, low carb. There's nothing metabolically promotive about it. But if we do a hard right-hand turn here and talk about what is metabolically promotive and constructive and optimizing, maybe you can talk about, I just wrote an article about, gut short chain fatty acids, propionate, butyrate, acetate, and satiation, and how that sort of reconnects you to a natural hunger satiety feedback loop. You're an expert in that area, so maybe you can discuss that the right way. I think the right way to do things. We've discussed the wrong way, so.
Right. The right way of doing things is you should eat for the gut microbiome, not because of a contest, not because you want to look good like an anorexic model on the cover of a magazine, not because you think that, I don't know, that you want a certain physique. I think that you should eat for health. And when you eat for health, naturally, I believe your metabolism improves, your health improves, and ultimately you will have a sustainable, good physique. It may not look extreme like you see in some of these sports, but you will have a good physique if you just simply eat for health. And eating for health, in my opinion, means eating for the gut microbiome that live in your gut. So mouth to anus, we have a very long, tortuous GI tract. And if you look at the GI tract of a human being, it resembles very much of an herbivore's GI tract, not a carnivore's GI tract. It's an herbivore's GI tract. It's very long and tortuous. There are 100 trillion gut microbiome that include viruses, fungi, and bacteria that cover the GI tract, mouth to anus. The majority of them live inside the colon, which is the large bowel, but there are also bacteria and microbiome that live from mouth to the small intestine and beyond. So these gut microbiome are defenses and basically pretty much protect you. And how do they protect you? Well, it's very simple. These gut microbiome live in a symbiotic relationship with us, and they feed on what you eat as a person. So let's just say you're eating a whole bunch of junk food. Well, that's all they get is junk food. Let's just say you're eating fiber-rich foods like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes. They are basically getting that kind of a food. So the health of your GI tract ends up equating to the types of food you're eating because of these bystanders called the gut microbiome. So you were mentioning all these molecules that are healthy. Well, they are called short-chain fatty acids. There's different ones, like the butyrates you were talking about, and the other ones. These short-chain fatty acids are produced as the result of eating fiber. So when you swallow fiber, this fiber goes inside your GI tract, and it meets with the gut microbiome. The gut microbiome eats it and ferments it and produces, through a fermentation process, short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids fight cancer, they repair DNA damage in the gut, and they heal the gut. So you've heard of this layman's term called leaky gut. That's how that gets repaired, because they repaired the tight junctions between the cells and prevent that quote-unquote leakiness people talk about. So that's how you heal your gut, is by eating fiber, and the fiber turns into short-chain fatty acids by the gut microbiome, and that keeps your gut healthy. Now, what happens when you don't eat fiber? Let's just say you're on this typical high-protein, low-carb bodybuilding diet.
Or keto. Or
keto, or paleo, or Atkins. There's a billion names for it. And then when you look at it, for people who are familiar with nutrition, like yourself, Scott, what is the difference? They're all just different names for the same crap. You know what I mean? You say potato, I say potato. You know what? It's all high protein, low carb, which
I've said that recently I've said keto is just Atkins in a prom dress.
Yeah. You know, exactly, absolutely. Even the paleo, it's the same thing. A lot of meat and very little fiber, virtually no fruits. I mean, what kind of diet would tell you not to eat fruits? The one that wants to kill you, literally. I mean, that's not natural, guys. Come on, we're supposed to, as human beings, consume a variety of fiber. And a lot of people think that, okay, if I just have one little, if I just eat a little asparagus with my meal, then I have enough greens and I'm good. No. Your body is designed to have a high level of diversity in the gut. So remember the gut microbiome we're talking about. You're supposed to, the most important health factor, when it comes to gut microbiome, if there was one single way to say, my gut microbiome is healthy and yours is not, it would be, let's compare who has more diversity. Okay, so the gut microbiome diversity is very important, and that comes from eating a variety of fiber, not just asparagus or cauliflower and a piece of steak. No, that doesn't happen when you eat like that. If you're eating, a lot of the fitness competitors, that's what they do. They have these little containers and they meal prep. They put a piece of muscle on their plate with a little bit of greens, and they think that's enough fiber. And that's why they get impacted and they have to have bowel surgery. That's why they lose their gut microbiome diversity. They're not consuming enough fiber. In order to have great gut microbiome diversity, you have to eat diverse types of carbohydrates, diverse types of fiber-rich foods with different colors, right? Soluble fiber, insoluble is what matters. So as we get into these bodybuilding diets, what we do is we lower the diversity of the gut microbiome by eliminating these foods. We restrict ourselves to just a piece of meat and a tiny little green vegetables. Now, I ask you, how is that enough fiber?
You just made me think of something. So back in the day, before I left, I used to shake my head because the bodybuilding industry, I say, one of my expressions used to be, they like to complicate what's simple and they simplify what's complicated. And there would be these contest prep coaches who were celebrated online, and yet all they advocated was tilapia and green beans 5 times a day, and this was somehow brilliant, and it applied to everybody. And it's just like, well, how does that, and as you're explaining, what does that do for a lack of diversity in the digestive tract, the alimentary tract and canal, like that? And so what happened, what I saw with my own eyes as coaching champions, in those days following the competition where they diversified their diet, they got sick.
That's right. Because they lost the gut microbiome.
And why? Okay, so let me ask you this, because it's still a head scratcher for me, especially when you go on social media. Why is this so hard for people to get? Why is this considered something that's controversial?
Is it controversial? I'm sorry.
Well, not to you and I, but I mean,
do the fitness competitors, do they think they're eating healthy?
Yes, well, yeah, they think as you look, so you are. Right. And here's an example that just came into my inbox earlier today. A fellow that writes me a lot works in a big office, and everyone's always on a diet, right? And it's always I distinguish between what I call fat people and overweight people, because I deliberately want to make the distinction connotatively. In other words, I think that overweight people are people who sincerely would like to change that, whereas fat people want to hide behind an identity and pretend that they're changing that. Whether that distinction of mine is, it's arbitrary, so whatever. But here's what happened. The guy writes me today, and one of the ladies who was on keto with a bunch of other ladies in the office got off keto and is trying to go plant-based, and she was eating an apple. And another lady, who's one of the leaders of the diet, who's like 60, 70 pounds overweight, comes over and chastises her for eating the apple. And then this fat lady, I hate saying that, her meal was sausage and bacon. That was her meal.
Right.
And like, why is common sense not common anymore? Why is something that nature provides, controversial?
I think keto has maybe people think it's such a cool thing, keto. Like, oh, wow, you're so cool because you can say keto. I don't know. I really don't know. But, I mean, sausage and bacon are cancer sticks. And that's proven, right? I mean, you really have to be ignorant, and you will have to have your head in the sand to think eating cancer sticks, i.e. Bacon and sausage, is good for you. So she's saying, I will have colon cancer, and I will do this diet, and I'm going to take my risk of colon cancer. It doesn't make sense, does it? So, I mean, I think that is just absolutely crazy that people do not look at the literature and the body of the evidence.
Okay, now let's speak of crazy, because I wrote a whole bunch of examples down for you that I've experienced, knowing that you'll be coming on, and thank you again for coming on. So there's a whole bunch. I know a couple of people are also gastroenterologists, talk about gluten sensitivity and gluten intolerance, and they have patients who are convinced that they have both. And so they pay them for, an endoscopy, and they find out they're not gluten insensitive and they're not gluten intolerant, but they pay good money because they want to be told that they are. Like, not only do people want to hear good news about their bad habits, they want to reinforce that they're victims. So there's some kind of nutritional victim, to something that just common, out there. And I remember Jimmy Kimmel did a live show once, interviewing people on the street about what is gluten, and half of them didn't know, but most of them just answered it's something that makes you fat. So I mean, this is the level of nonsense. Do you experience a lot of hypochondria and a lot of sort of self-inflicted victim status nutritionally amongst the people that come see you?
I'm not saying if you have celiac disease or
No, of course not.
no
No.
problem. So let me just make a quick distinction for people who are listening. There's celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disorder in a genetically susceptible person, where when they eat gluten, which is a piece of protein, they get basically they have this autoimmune reaction, and that destroys their bowel. They should never eat gluten. Then you have something called gluten sensitivity and gluten intolerance, because what happens is, as we've had some refined grains in our diet, and we've had damaged guts, we've developed gluten sensitivity, where we basically cannot tolerate the gluten anymore. And there is an antibody testing, it's a blood test to determine it. But most people are not gluten sensitive, most people are not celiac disease, and yet they come here and see me, and they're gluten free. And I'm like, why are you gluten free? I don't know, I was searching the internet and they said to go gluten free, so I did, because gluten is inflammatory. I'm like, that's interesting. What else are you eating? Cheese and dairy? I'm like, oh, okay, so the dairy couldn't possibly be the root of your problem. It's the gluten. It makes me so upset, because gluten is like, I don't know, 1 in 100 cases I will get someone has some kind of a problem with gluten. 99% of the people have problems with dairy. Yet dairy doesn't get a bad name, but gluten does.
We're on the same page there. I just wanted your input on that. If you actually saw, like, self-induced victim perception, that, I mean, because the population's what, something like only 10% or have any kind of gluten.
Like 1 in 100 people will have actual celiac disease, and and so as we eat on more and more unhealthy, and we get this quote-unquote leaky gut, it increases your risk of gluten intolerance, and not just gluten intolerance, everything intolerance. You can't eat any food anymore, because as you're eating all this meat and dairy and restricting your diet and not eating vegetables and fruits, what you're doing is you're decreasing your gut microbiome diversity, you're killing the gut microbiome, you're basically making your gut unhealthy, and the way that happens is when you eat a lot of saturated fat, the bonds between the cells break. So here's an introcyte, which means gut cell, connected together through what's called a tight junction. Saturated fat has shown to break these tight junctions, and the gut becomes quote-unquote leaky. So everything just flows into the blood, from the gut into the blood, and your body finds it foreign. It's an antigen, it attacks it, forms antibodies. So then what happens is, over time, you become more and more intolerant to different types of foods, and gluten is one of them. So you have these people who have, like, we do these food allergy testing, and they're like intolerant to like everything. So in order to become more and more restrictive, what you should do, I don't even do allergy testing on my patients half the time. I tell them, no, I'm not going to do it.
Fascinating.
Because I avoid these foods, because
it's
going to like create a scare for you. Let's just give up the junk out of your diet. Don't eat refined sugars, don't drink alcohol, don't eat dairy and milk products, don't eat meat. Let's heal your gut, then we can test, and you'll see you have no problems, and you'll be able to tolerate everything.
You just open a whole can of whoop ass that I would like to talk about. One of them is, you reminded me as you're talking there, why do you think ladies in particular are so willing to trade feeling their worst for looking their best? Why do you think that, they would, I don't know, that just pops into my head that, whatever it takes, doing damage to long-term metabolic health, hormonal, biochemical health, is worth the trade-off because we know, right, that keto over the long term is acid producing, causes all kinds of issues, but short term, if I can be a couple dress sizes smaller, then I'll worry about long term when long term comes around. Do you think that's all just social pressure?
Oh, I think there's such a tremendous amount of social pressure. As a woman, I can tell you that it's an awful situation. Whereas the men are valued based on their intelligence and their status in the workforce. Women are valued based on their looks. I mean,
but women are completely devote themselves to that too, right? There's not a whole lot of resistance to that.
well, I mean, what choice do they have? I feel bad. Like, I'm not trying to say that's an excuse. I mean, I didn't follow that path. I mean, I'm not sitting there constantly going, I would do anything to lose 10 pounds, including going on a keto diet. Of course, but you can imagine the social pressure. It's the same thing as the minute you say vegan, people are like, oh.
Yes, I know. I'm quite aware.
But the thing is, like, people have these, I don't know, they just have these mindsets on certain things, and so one of the things that I think women look at all these magazines, they look at all these social media images, and they start valuing themselves as based on the way they look, and then there comes a point of desperation, and you're desperate.
Yeah, and here's one of the things I said in my Empowered Woman Experience course that I taught in the book that I wrote. The modern industrial beauty complex machine, the vanity industries, if you will, their whole marketing agenda, if you look from anything from makeup to weight loss to fashion, is to get females to buy into the notion from a very young age that you're never good enough the way you are.
Yeah.
Right? So, and the reason I say that is I could show people, I've talked about this before, when I was training competitors and stuff, I trained models, I trained high-level competitors, I trained strippers, I trained, and I could show you an email from a drop-dead gorgeous feature stripper and an email from a lady I was helping who's, say, 60, 70 pounds overweight, and they read exactly the same in terms of lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth, lack of just buying into, but I'm not good enough the way I am. And I've tried to get people to reverse the notion in my book, The Anti-Diet Approach to Weight Loss and Weight Control. What I call the North American diet mentality is that, I can't feel good about myself until I lose the weight. It's actually the other way around. When you feel good about yourself, you'll lose the weight. Mm-hmm. You got any comments on that? And then there's one other thing stuck in my noggin from
I agree with you 100%. Self-love is lacking in many people. Women are lacking self-love, and that's where they fall into the trap of not feeling good enough.
Yeah, I just I'm fomenting a video I'm going to do about people like raising their pet, and they have to put their pet down after 12 years, and why they're so distraught, and why they're so, because we nurture what we love and we love what we nurture, and then after that amount of time, that love is gone. But when do we start treating ourselves like someone worth nurturing in that same capacity? When do the ladies start treating themselves like someone worth that level of nurture that they would give their own pet? Instead of the self-rejection, self-hate, not good enough. It's mind-boggling. But I don't know if do you have a comment on that? Because there's another.
Yeah, I think as women, we are nurturing beings. So what we end up doing is we put our kids first, right? If we have multiple kids, then multiply that effort that you're putting into the kids. Then we put our husbands second, and then we put our jobs third. Then we put our pets fourth, and then if we have time, we'll take care of ourselves. And so that's what happens. You see all these married women who are chasing after kids. They look like crap. They don't take care of themselves. They haven't brushed their hair for 5 days. They start walking around in sweats. They don't even, they don't really have a job because they have to quit their job because the husband's needy, the cat is needy, the dog needs care, and the kids need help. And then they end up sabotaging themselves. And then the husband cheats, they leave, they never loved themselves in the first place. So now they are divorced, out of shape, with 3 kids and 2 pets, and they don't know what to do. And so it's, you know what I mean? It's a big problem.
like, you would be surprised. Like, a lot of people are going to react against what you just said, and they're going to be like, that's unfair, and that's, painting everyone with the same brush. But you would be surprised how common that scenario is with the people I deal with. Yes, they hire me because they want a physique transformation, but what they really want is the results of what they think that's going to bring them, which is that self-nurturing, self-connection, self-compassion, reconnection to their own identity again, right? So they really want the results of what they think the physique transformation is going to bring them, because like you said, they've been outwardly nurturing for so long, they've lost the capacity to do it for themselves. And fitness can definitely be it can definitely be the path that delivers you there. It can definitely be the vehicle for that kind of thing. But if you're doing it with an eye on the weight scale and an eye on the mirror, then you're not going to be present for the process to deliver you to that kind of promised land. So that's something that bothers me in particularly, because I must have at least right now a half a dozen clients at least who are going through exactly what you just described. The kids grew up, the husband got bored and tired, they were in a sexless relationship, he went elsewhere. She's 25 years into a relationship, and now she's on her own, and what do I do, and how do I do it?
If anybody decided to basically, if anyone just right now heard this and said, oh, that's not true, think about it. What is an empty nester? An empty nester is somebody that I see almost every day in my clinic, by the way. I see it all the time. There's no denying this. People who put their entire self-worth based on their children. And they give to their children, and when the children leave, they have no purpose, and then they start fighting with the husband, because that's all they did all day is take care of kids, and they weren't taking care of themselves, and they weren't loving themselves. They were just putting everything into their kids, and once the kids are gone, they get a divorce, because there's just the two of them were just together because of the kids. And that's where they're lacking self-love, and they're not living lives for themselves. They're living it for the children. That's not good.
and to bring it full circle, there's what I call the triangle of awareness, which is your mental self, your emotional self, and your physical behavioral self. And I've always argued that those things are meant to be an isosceles triangle, equally balanced. And if they're not, that tells you something is out of balance, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, behavioral. So to bring it back full circle, people will say, well, what's all this got to do with anything you're talking about? Well, it's what you just said, at the top of the hour. All of this affects gut health, because gut health is a reflection also on your emotional well-being. They're connected, right? Like one of the first places we feel depression is in the gut.
Yeah.
Like literally, I have a gut feeling, ... right? Like, comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, basically, your gut has so much power when it comes to hormonal balance, the overall hormonal balance, neurotransmitter production.
Neurotransmitters, yes.
So, for example, serotonin, most of serotonin in your body, where 90% of it is made by the gut cells. So basically, in the gut, it's made in the gut. So basically, whereas in the past we used to think, well, just stick someone on a serotonin reuptake inhibitor or SSRI, we now know that it's always a good idea to put them on a healthy diet and improve their gut health, and perhaps their depression goes away. Wow. So I think what happens is yeah, absolutely. I barely ever put my patients on an antidepressant. I'm like, how are you eating? What are you eating? Are you taking care of your gut? If you're not eating healthy, how do you expect to not be depressed? And if I gave you an antidepressant, it's going to help you for a little while, but then you're back to being depressed again. Then we have to add another antidepressant and another one. And when are you going to stop and say, I'm going to start putting myself first and take care of myself first before I take care of my dog and cat and my husband and my kids? You've got to eat healthy. And what happens is, as we get busier, because as women now have a tremendous amount of pressure on them, because whereas we weren't even in the workforce before, now we are. We're bosses, leaders, we're CEOs and CFOs of companies, we're doctors and lawyers, but the other responsibilities have not gone away. We're still taking care of our husbands who are act like they're 5 years old. We're taking care of our children. We're taking care of our pets, and so it's overwhelming. It's extremely, extremely tiring, and it puts a lot of pressure on us. And sometimes
so it's the old double reinforcement, right? It's the old line. It's not like what you said. Okay, your patients come in first thing. What are you eating? But not only that, but the double reinforcement. It's not just what you're eating, but it's what's eating you, which is usually like overburdened with busyness.
Oh, of course, we're busy and we're putting ourselves last. So what you have to do, and I get that way all the time, like not all the time, but I get that way where I have 15 patients to take care of every day with all their problems. Then I have my child and he brings home a C. I have my ex-husband. I have my family to take care of. So what happens is whenever that happens, I drop everything and go to the gym. I say, you know what, I'm going to go and exercise and shut off my phone, and I put myself first. Then I give myself some self-love, I recharge my battery, and then I can give back to all these other people. But let's just say I'm eating hot dogs and sausage. If I'm eating like garbage, like a keto diet, how could I ever feel well enough to take care of all these other hundreds of people I'm taking care of? It's impossible. So it all goes back to maintaining a good diet to give you energy, to give you vitality, to give you the fuel you need to be that person who's taking care of 15 different people at one time, you know?
Yeah, you have to have something that grounds you that's just yours, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, without that, because, you know, as you were saying that, like I was just having this conversation with a client that a lot of my clients, as soon as life gets challenging, they abandon the exact thing that can ground them. They abandon the foundation that will keep them, you know, buoyant through whatever challenge they're facing, right? So that's what fitness is meant to be, right? It's meant to be like whatever vocation someone has outside of their occupation is usually a grounding force, right? Someone's into gardening, another person's into old cars, another person's into whatever, right? But it's a grounding force so that when life gets to them, they can go to this place and lose themselves in it and recharge and reinvent and reboot. And what happens in the fitness thing, though, especially among women, life gets challenging and overburdened, and they abandon the very thing that can help them. So it's like, oh, I'm too tired to work out. I was up all night worrying. The worry monster got me, and so I slept in, and I missed my workout. And it's like, no. That's when it counts the most.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to move a few things, like getting back, and I'm sorry to get off on tangents, but I do that all the time. And whenever, like I said, whenever I have a qualified female on board, I want to get, you know, into female stuff. So I'm sorry about that if we're off to tangent on gut health and stuff. But
no, that was very helpful. I thought I'm learning from you too.
Well, oh, okay. Let me reel it in. So here's a few, and then we'll finish it up. A few comments that I wrote down that I just got in the last week or so. So one lady, menopausal, her naturopath told her that because she's in menopause, she shouldn't be vegan and plant-based because no way she should be eating carbs. Now keep in mind this is someone already struggling with weight. So address that particular naturopathic advice. And
13. Show, can I cuss?
Yeah, no, you cuss. Okay, good. Yeah, because I wanted you to address that particular.
I'm really real. Okay, I don't beat around the bush. I think that's bullshit. It's pure bullshit what she was told. It's absolutely wrong. Where is the science in that? There is none.
But do clients who go visit someone for medical problem want the science? They want the answer, right? So how problematic is
that? Where's the science in that? Where's anything in that? It's just basically bullshit. So basically, I want to clarify to postmenopausal women, and I'm very passionate about helping women with hormonal imbalances.
That's why I wanted to bring that particular example up. Yeah. Please.
I'm very passionate about age management or anti-aging, what they call anti-aging, which is not anti-aging, it's age management. So basically, hormone optimization therapy is key. I do hormone optimization on myself, and I use progesterone to optimize because I'm estrogen dominant. But anyway, some people may know what that means, some people may not. But let me tell you, in my practice, I've made a point to take care of postmenopausal women with hormonal imbalances, because as we age, we're living longer. So our ovaries basically start working at about age 50, yet we're going to live 20 years, 30 years without any estrogen and progesterone. Well, not without any, but with very little estrogen and progesterone, because our ovaries are not working. That leads to postmenopausal symptoms like hot flashes, palpitations, night sweats, insomnia, osteoporosis, heart disease, abnormal weight gain, depression, anxiety. So what I always suggest to my patients is look into bioidentical hormone optimization therapy while you're going through that menopausal stage, and then you can get off of it if you want. I will probably use them for the rest of my life. Go to a trained specialist who knows how to do bioidentical hormones and get on these hormones, because it's not worth suffering through it. The previously synthetic hormones caused cancer, estrogen and progesterone, but we now have, we don't believe that the cancer was caused because of the actual estrogen. We all have estrogen in our bodies. Estrogen doesn't necessarily cause cancer. It was those synthetic hormones that caused cancer. So if she's having postmenopausal or menopausal symptoms, number one, she needs to get bioidentical hormone therapy. Number two, becoming plant-based is key in pretty much improving your heart health when you're a postmenopausal woman, when you're at risk for heart disease and a heart attack, when you're at risk for Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Why wouldn't you eat a plant-based diet? And that has nothing to do with your hormones. When you eat estrogen and progesterone and cortisol, when you're eating meat and dairy on a standard American diet, you're getting tons of cow estrogen and tons of cow progesterone, which causes cancer. So in your postmenopausal or menopausal state, you should never eat those cancer-causing products, which could cause breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and uterine cancer. Instead, you should be on a whole food plant-based diet, which lowers your risk of cancer and heart disease. And at the same time, you need to get bioidentical hormones to help you with your symptoms, because there's really no food on this earth that's going to take away some of these symptoms, which are quite severe. I mean, you're going from estrogens of like 250 down to undetectable levels, and that's just not going to work for some people. You're going from progesterone levels of 20 down to less than 0.1 on some people. That just it's just really hard on your system when you suddenly lose these energy producing hormones due to age related decline. And food has nothing to do with it. There's nothing you can do as far as food to compensate for these symptoms. But what you can do is lower your risk of other diseases like cancer, heart disease, and dementia, and weight gain, and or obesity and all that stuff by eating a whole food plant-based diet. So this naturopath clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. Or she, sorry.
Do you think there's a level of what I call paradigm blindness involved there? I was watching Dr. Garth Davis. I'm sure you know who he is.
Good friend, yes.
Yeah. So he was saying in an interview the other day, someone shows up to their doctor, their naturopath, and they say, "I've got such and such a medical issue," and it comes out that they're vegan. Oh, it's because you're vegan.
Yes.
But another person comes into the doctor's office who's overweight with the same issue, who's not vegan, and it's never connected to the diet. It's not like, well, you're eating too much animal protein, you're eating too much junk food. They never hear that. But if someone comes in and identifies as vegan or plant-based, and that's your problem. So you find there's a little bit of that, like it's like, wow, that
all the time. You have so SIBO is one of the most common disorders I see here. Okay, it's a very common one. Okay.
Let me just say small intestinal bowel obstruction, just for people who don't know. So go ahead.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. It's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Sorry.
So you have an overgrowth of colonic type bacteria in your small intestine, and it causes gas and bloating. So a lot of these people who are vegans, who go to naturopaths, and they're like, oh, you need to eat at least egg and fish, because that's going to solve your whole problem of having SIBO. I'm like, how is that going to help? Where is the science in that? Where are you getting that? So a lot of people, as soon as the naturopaths think, or doctors, any doctor, or even the naturopaths, any practitioner who's practicing, when they hear vegan, they're like, oh, I don't really know what the heck is going on, but I can blame your vegan diet because that's gonna help every time, because it makes people fearful. Oh my God, maybe they're right. Maybe if I eat eggs and fish, my problem's gonna go away, which of course it's not gonna go away. But it's like, then you get the obese person, as you said, who's eating junk food, but then they're like, you have SIBO. It just happens. It just does. I mean, there's no evidence to say that SIBO happens in vegans and it doesn't happen in meat eaters. It happens in everybody. It could happen in anyone. But if they're eating the standard American diet, nobody goes and says, these naturopaths don't go, well, why don't you avoid the dairy? Why don't you avoid meat and fish and eggs? They say the exact opposite. I don't get it. It's just unbelievable, the lack of knowledge in regards to nutrition and gut health. And suddenly everyone's a GI doctor, right?
Are you familiar with the new Canada Food Guide? It's making a lot of splash out in the world that Canada finally got it right. I don't know if you're...
Yeah. They eliminated dairy out of their whole food scheme, and so now they're recommending, yes.
Yeah, and pretty much meat and pretty much, portion sizes and things like that. Now that's I got a whole bunch of stuff I wrote down for you that were actual letters from people, but it would take too long to get into. But one of the things you reminded me of, it has to do with portion sizes. So one of the things that drives me insane, I have a private Facebook group, and if you have a private Facebook group, along the right you see all these other private Facebook groups. Now, when you go plant-based, inevitably, once you have a metabolic adaptation that's constructive and productive and positive, you'll end up needing to eat more volume of food to get the same kind of calorie absorption. I mean, yes. I've said that, T. Colin Campbell has said that, and yet I see these Facebook groups with thousands of members. We're talking 50, 60,000 members. Vegan intermittent fasting. Vegan, oh my God, it makes my head want to explode. We've got this keto. and there is vegan keto, and it's I mean, anybody educated in this area, your head's going to want to explode to hear. But it's back to this North American diet mentality where we think that limiting food is the solution, yet our brains are hardwired to never want to do that. So, if intermittent fasting was something that our brains actually responded well to in terms of human evolution, then things like fasting for religious reasons and Ramadan wouldn't be sacrifices. They wouldn't be hard. They would just be how people lived. But they're hard because that's not how our minds work in terms of our drive for survival is for sex and for food, right? So what do you think of these groups that try to say, go vegan, but also control these portions and fast and do all these other things? We'll finish on that, but boy, I'd love to have you back. But go ahead.
Don't believe in portion control. Portion control is a thing of the past. It's old science where you would eat crappy food, but then you would control your portions. Instead of 2 pints of ice cream, eat 1 scoop, so have your cake and eat it too. But if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, it's almost impossible to get fat from eating a whole food plant-based diet. So I would say no portion control. Eat as much as your little body desires, and but eat a whole food plant-based diet, no refined sugars, no oil. So they say the vegan versus plant-based, no SOS, sugar, oil, salt. You can have a little salt, but no oil, no sugar. Eat as much as you want. It's I always compare ourselves to the other herbivores. For example, imagine the horses. They don't have refrigerators. They don't have processed foods, right? Can you imagine two horses talking, going, I'm doing this intermittent fasting today. They kind of graze around in nature and eat whenever they're hungry. They stop eating when they're hungry. They drink water when they're thirsty. They sleep when they're tired. So that's how we were supposed to be. We're supposed to walk around, pick some berries from the tree, eat some vegetables, and when we're hungry, we're supposed to eat. When we're not hungry, we're not supposed to, but we don't have gobs of processed food in the refrigerator that we can binge on. So that's where people came, because the access, so easy to access the refrigerator, so easy to grab a packaged food. So when people eat that way, then they end up forcing themselves to portion control. Why do that? Eat as much as you want. Eat tons of food. Don't limit yourself. Don't restrict yourself. Eat a whole food plant-based diet. That way you'll never have to count calories. You'll never have to check your portions. You can eat as much as you want, and there's no gaining weight on that.
And yet for the consumer, what out there makes millions and millions of dollars? In the fitness industry, I don't know if you've heard of If It Fits Your Macros.
Right.
So, again, all this portion control nonsense, you can have licorice and gummy bears if it fits your macros. And then we've got all calorie counting and Fitbit and all this outside in stuff where we're supposed to think that our bodies are just so stupid that if we don't have mathematical formulas to live by, like we're just going like there's no appreciation for the wisdom of the body. Like it,
Well,
like
you used to be a coach. You know what these coaches do? They try to get basically create dependency on people. Like, for example, if you don't know as a person how to count macros, then you're going to need a coach to tell you what to eat to fit your macros, which is complete BS, right? But people fall for it because they're desperate, and they think if they just follow a macro diet. And so these coaches put foods together and they pretend like, oh, this has got 50 grams of carbs, 20 grams of protein, and this. It's so inefficient anyway. I mean, no one knows, because what the fitness industry does, what they do, for example, they'll give you a piece of meat and be like, that's your protein. When nothing in nature is only isolated to one macronutrient. That is not just protein. It's got tons of fat in it. Okay, so, when people count their macros, they think they're counting, they're really not. I mean, it's totally inexact. When you think you're counting calories, you're not. Those nutritional labels could not be far from being inexact. So pretty much, I think it's just people think they're doing a good job, but they're not. It's not really true. But the fitness industry and the diet industry is feeding off of that. And unfortunately, they're selling programs and selling foods because they're manipulating the macronutrients to create dependency.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always say that my job as a coach is to try to free people eventually from coaching. So it's like to empower someone to eventually be able to do it for themselves while seeing through the gimmicks and the bullshit and all the rest of it. So we're way over our time.
My patient is in now, so I have to go.
Yeah, well, it was just an absolute thrill for me, Dr. Angie. I hope I can have you back someday.
I would love to. I would love to be back and talk to you. I think you're amazing, and you know so much, and it's a pleasure. I feel so connected to you because I feel like we think exactly alike.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and it's been pleasure is mine. Trust me. So until next time, thank you again on behalf of all my listeners as well, and I just really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.